So I want to use the rest of the time to talk about you and what you got going on, man. So tell me about Fred Hampton Leftists. What's going on there? What do you got coming up, man? I saw your tweet this morning. I retweeted it. Looks
Nice,
like some cool stuff.
nice. So, I've been talking about doing this for a long time because I call myself a citizen journalist. It's not anything fancy. It's just the concept that anyone who can share a story is a journalist. I don't like people who gatekeep who can be considered a journalist. That's why people who continue to smear Julian Assange annoys me to no end. Who like, he's not a journalist. Like, yes, he is. Shut up.
He's won awards for it.
Yeah.
He's won awards for journalism.
Yes.
And technically these days he's a publisher. So if you really want to nitpicky, if someone's smearing him, well, he's not even a journalist. You're right. He's a publisher, which isn't a freaking crime. So
Whenever
there you go.
Say that I can't take anything they say about politics seriously. But anyway, back on the Fred Hampton. So what my goal is, I want to give, I want to amplify the voices of people who not usually lifted up. You listen to CNN, MSNBC, usually the approved talking heads. So I think we need to let that go and stop watching these people. Like, there's no value in us watching cable news and no value in us propping them up. So even I watch a lot of leftist independent news, and even people I disagree with. Like, so I have people who are like, "Why are you watching?" I'm like, well, I just want to see another perspective that's not corporate news or whatever. So anyone who's authentic, I would support in terms of independent news, because I think it's very important, because that's what tanked our campaign, was literally the corporate news bias and the Bernie blockouts. I mean, I can get into a long spiel on that. But what is very important, and one thing I know is particularly that drove me crazy and drive a lot of Black leftists crazy, is how our voice is completely erased. Because think about the so-called leftists, they're now on the left, they pretty much Democrat operatives. You see on CNN, they'll have the approved voices, the Van Jones, the Don Lemons. On MSNBC, you see Joanne Reed, Jason Johnson. These are the worst of the Black community. They are the Black liberals that literally led us off a cliff. So they're literally a misconception that I have seen my entire life in the media. And I know this from talking to people in our community. No one likes the ruling class around here. And you look at people who vote, yes, Black people majority vote Democrat, but then majority of Black people don't vote. The reason why we don't vote, because we don't like the ruling class, because they don't represent us. And if you look at the numbers of people who vote, the youth Blacks, we don't like the Democrat Party, because there is a select group of people, a young Black leftists, who are completely ignored in the political dialogue. Which is why I'm blessed I have my platform now, because I guess you guys discovered one. And what I want to do is I want to give the voice to more of these people, because a lot of people, when I wrote my article about how Black boomers let off a cliff because they embraced neoliberalism, because that's exactly what they've done. And we need an opposition to that. When I see Black boomers voting for Joe Biden en masse over the guy who said he would give them health care, I'm like, okay, this is a problem. This is something that we got to start calling out. I'm like, bro, it's time for some tough love in terms of Black boomers and boomers in general. But I'm talking about people I know in my community, the people who just blindly vote for the Democrat Party, people who blindly idolize Barack Obama, and some of the worst people. Like, there's literally Black people who would like Hillary Clinton and them. That makes no sense to me. And so with the Fred Hampton leftists, what we are Black leftists who've been ignored. And the liberal class has been shocked by my rises last year. I always like to post the number of people who have me blocked, because a lot of people who follow my tweets, they know I'm not malicious. Like, I don't attack people. I don't
see how anyone can get mad at you, even if they disagree with you. People are so petty, though.
I've been blocked by over 5,000 accounts on Twitter.
Wow.
I don't even attack people.
How do you know?
My politics. They had, and this thing is, that's an undercount, because you know how they got these weird apps on Twitter. So
okay, you used an app.
Yeah, there's an app you can sign up to, how many people can block, and you understand that number is low, because it only counts the people who signed up for that. So that's the number that I know, people who signed up to see how many people blocked them. So the number is way higher than that. I actually rounded up. The number was around 4,000, but someone told me, they were like, that they only show the people that actually has that app, so it doesn't show all Twitter. So that number is actually really low. And so I'm like, what's my crime? What do I do to get worthy? I don't tweet at people. I usually just tweet my politics. I respond to big names. Like, I punch up. Like, if you got a giant account, I may call you out, but I'm not aiming at like the small guy. Very rarely. But people hate the opinions of Black leftists because it shatters the liberal psyche. because the liberal psyche is they are standing up for the disenfranchised community. And if you're not supportive of the Democrat Party, you're a racist. And we were like, no, you're not standing up for us. You're literally propping up white supremacy, and your party is a joke. So they can't really debate us, so they silence us. So what we want to do at the Fred Hampton Leftists podcast is start to expand this voice that have been missing from the political sphere for a long time. I mean, there are a lot of great people that are doing work right now, but it's still very infantile. We're Fred Hampton leftists, we're Dr. Cornel West leftists, MLK leftists.
So is it going to be just a question about like just structure? Is it going to be like an audio podcast or like an audio video? Is it going to be like a YouTube thing or a little bit of everything?
We're gonna have it in audio form. I'm gonna be twitching it live on my show as well. I mean, this is a giant collaboration project because a lot of people who follow us know us individually. Rome, he has a great YouTube show. Compton J, he has an amazing show as well. I've been doing Jackie Poe has amazing audio podcasts. So what we're doing here with the Fred Hampton podcast, we are kind of coming together, and we're gonna have we had our last panel, our first episode we did last Saturday. I streamed it, and we got it live on our YouTube page. We're gonna be meeting up once a week to have discussions, but you're gonna be seeing a lot of work from Black leftists. So it may not be all of us at the same time. So it may it could be I could be interviewing Dr. Cornel West on our show one day, or maybe Andrew Rome is on the street because he like to do a lot of on-field reporting. So he could be on the streets of Detroit talking to people about their everyday life. That's why I really appreciate the content that he does, because he more direct activist talking to people. And then Compton J,
he's a Detroit guy.
Yeah, he's a Michigan activist.
Oh man, you got to put me in touch with him.
Yeah. You
put me in touch with him.
We've been good. He's been on my show. He's a friend of the show. Once again, the Fred Hampton Leftist podcast is all about and people who say Twitter not real life. This is what you're missing on, because as we talked about earlier, there's a sense of leftists where we feel like we're going crazy because there's no one who represents us, when no one actually believes what we believe. And as someone who was deeply dissatisfied with Democrat Party, Black leadership, as a Black man, we hooked up on Twitter with a lot of Black leftists, and there's a very tight solidarity I see in that we have amongst each other, because we like, dude, you get it too. You're not on the plantation as well. You don't like Democrat. I knew I'm not crazy, and I'm like, dude, there's so many of us that prop each other up, that support each other. Why not just make it a thing? Like we all supporting like each other. So we got this podcast together we all pretty much friends on Twitter. We all pretty much activists. We pretty much in this game one way or another. We like let's put our own stuff out there where they can ignore, and that's why I'm very excited to see that people are excited about that. And when I have Rome and Compton J, Jackie, all of us on the show, you get the perspective from Black people you're not going to ever hear in almost anywhere else. Like I'm thinking, where else in media will you get this from? Because people listen to our show. I mean, we're not anywhere. We just getting started, so we're just climbing. But people who watch it, we never ever heard news like this before, because it's never been presented. It's never been presented. I can have a hard time thinking about what the options are out there. I mean, there's some great voices out there. I'm not saying there's not, but we want people who are not necessarily Harvard educated, or not necessarily part of the in group, to tell their story. Because I'm just some guy in Kansas City who used to sell cars for years, who blew up on Twitter for some reason. There's no reason for me to have a platform I do, but it's about people who actually live the struggle, who can tell our story, tell us why we don't like Democrat Party. This is why they don't want to listen to us, because Rome, the guy telling you earlier, he will actually tell you stories about how the Democrat Party harmed his life, his family life, and everyone he knows his life. And same thing for me too. So how can you discount these stories? You can't. That's why I think it's important to tell them. That's what our show is going to be about.
So what are the 10 demands?
The 10 demands, this is one of many of the activist groups I'm working with, because once again, the issue of police abolition is dear to my heart, because I mean, the Black community has been telling the story for a very, very long time. It's just only through the internet recently people understand that we was right. The white American for decades. I mean, my dad would tell me stories. Our generation, there was never a point where the Black community was content with the police and other disenfranchised community. Once again, I work on an article on defund police as well. And another thing I want to bring up is, once again, it's not just a Black issue, it's a issue. But if you're not a member of the ruling class or the privileged class, because the police has always been a fascist system used to go after and impose racial hierarchies and go after disenfranchised communities, make sure they kept in line. This idea that people have that the police is a system that is designed to protect people and protect and serve. That is straight up ridiculous. And critics of defund the police and police abolition are deeply unserious people, because there's never been a point in time where the police ever existed to protect and serve us. In fact, there's actually a judge ruling, I posted it on Twitter a few days ago, where they rule constantly in federal court they don't have no obligation to protect you. You guys know that the only obligation that police have to protect us is when we're in custody. They legally got to protect people in custody, but they don't have to protect us. That's what federal court has ruled. And that what we want to the awareness we want to spread in 10 Demands. And we launched this group around the George Floyd protest because we was starting to see the spread and awareness of this fascist police state. And it's very important to have a protest and spread awareness, but there's a point where we got to make action be known. And we were just talking about how local politics is very important. So we have a list of 10 demands. And these 10 demands, we literally want you to plug this up and bring this up to your local support and demand people, local politicians, local representatives to support these initiatives. This is how you make change over the long term. So that's why we come with you 10 demands. So we actually have action on top of what the protests are.
Well, are the 10 demands like all around police and law enforcement specifically, or is it like just broader?
Yeah, I can go through them now. So, okay. But once again, mostly it focuses on police abolition, and our tenets is all about the road to abolition, because a lot of people need to understand that when you defund the police, that's a road to abolition, and that's what abolitionists have spoke about in their literature for decades. That's what Angela Davis speaks about all the time. So a lot of people assume that we don't have a path to getting this done. We do have a path to getting police abolition done, because once you actually rid the community of these fascist police system that is overlording us and hauling away all our resources and putting that to education, putting that to mental health care, you can drop the crime rate by doing that. There's constant studies that show that. We've seen that done throughout multiple societies in multiple countries, where you can drop the crime rate by literally investing to the communities. So once we defund the police, we reallocate that to local communities, and they can protect. And my stance is, A1 differs on this a little bit. I'm like, bro, you have your funds in your local community. You can do what you want to do in your local community. Have your local leaders, because that's how it used to be done. When you look at former civilizations of the past, there was never this idea of this fascist police that we have now. Yeah. Always local communities that will look after each other. And then this idea of carceral punishment, this is what we talk about in 10 Demands, that only became a thing because of capitalism and imperialism.
Yes.
That's what a lot of people don't understand. That's why I say, and I make the point, that critics of defund the police and critics of police abolition, they are deeply unserious, because they don't even understand the issue. They don't even understand the system they are propping up. The system they're propping up literally came to be because capitalism needed a way to keep the working class in line, and they needed a way to protect the material goods of the ruling class, and they also needed to install racial hierarchies once they started invading other countries and having slaves. That's why they had to have slave patrols. And then once these communities started integrating into societies, whether it be, once again, there are racial issues in that, but once again, it's all about imposing hierarchies. So when you had the Irish that came in America, they were victims of police brutality as well. The indigenous people have been probably the worst victims of police brutalities, literally ever since we wiped them out. It's always been a thing. They are literally designed to enforce the hierarchies. So that we want to spread awareness on that, and then we put our demands, we put we want people to understand what we can do to fix this.
Sure.
Defund the police, demilitarize police, and I mean these things. Like, a lot of these things we are talking about are like common sense reforms, and this would drive me crazy. You have a lot of liberals who say we can't defund the police. We got to do common sense reforms. We're like, okay, we address those reforms, and you guys not even for those reforms. You know what a popular reform that you can do that will actually greatly improve the situation, that which I support? There are a lot of people like, oh, they're not good reforms. There are good reforms. One good reform is disarming the police. Liberals don't even support that. Yeah. They don't like. So when they say, well, so just know, when liberals say we gotta support reform instead of defunding police or abolition, just know they gaslighting you, because when you actually bring up good reforms like we do in our list here, they're actually not for them.
Well, yeah, and the whole concept of like we can just reform it, it's like, no, that ship sailed a long, long time ago. You can't reform what this whole thing has become, because it has nothing to do with serving and protecting. I mean, Imagine if we didn't have the concept of police as we do in the United States, and like we were just randomly sitting around some table trying to decide how to like enforce laws and for a society, and someone came up with the idea of police as we know it. You'd laugh that person out of the room. Like you'd laugh that like, hey, I got it. We're gonna have really poorly trained people with guns, and they're just gonna respond to everything, and they could just kill people whenever
They
they
got
want.
no accountability. They get immunity.
No accountability. We're not going to do a good job screening them. So chances are KKK members of white supremacists, they're going to get through. But I don't see a problem. Like you'd laugh that person out of the room. You'd be like, get the fuck out of this room. You're out of your mind.
And this is why I always explain to them. And the people who prop up the police, they're like children to me. Like I have no respect for them. Like these are the people who like they will watch Rush Hour, like they will watch Die Hard, and they would think that's a documentary on how the police actually operate. They actually think like police are these gun-toting heroes that are stopping crime, even though they don't. They literally don't. I'm doing my research in the article. They don't even solve 2% of serious crimes. They only solve 2% of serious crimes. They literally don't test most rape kits. They don't do nothing. They actually do nothing to solve crimes. And people
half the time they create it. I mean, half the time it's like, I mean, you get these accounts from people who went along on like police, like you can go along in the car or whatever because you know a police officer, and they're like, you guys are just driving around looking to start problems. Like you just pull people over because you're bored, and you're like, in a lot of cases these people are like the school bully who never grew up and now they have a badge and a gun. What could possibly go wrong? And I think a lot of people who are apologists for him, they're also just stuck in their own bubble. Yeah. And maybe they have like a neighbor who's a cop and he's a nice guy. So they're like, come on. It's like, look, I'm not going to argue over whether or not your neighbor's a nice guy. I don't have that kind of bandwidth. I'll just take your word for it. But what I'm saying is the system that your neighbor is a part of is corrupt beyond repair, is repulsive beyond repair, and it's just there to brutalize people. It shouldn't exist. That system should be abolished, and we should reinvent the way we have law enforcement in our lives. And guess what? If your neighbor is such a nice guy, he can be part of that, and he can be part of the new reimagined law enforcement that we come up with that will inevitably not be shittier than what we have now.
Yeah, propaganda is so bad. People don't understand this idea that they have as a police, and what they believe they do never existed. Like what they believe the police did, it never happened. Like even when you look past the slave patrol, everyone talk about the slave patrol. There's one aspect of police history and police culture. But when have they been this crime stopping, community helping organization? Even when
in the movie,
even when they stopped being slave patrol, even when they implemented police as a way to enforce local order, they became corrupt. They get bought up by outlaws. Like that was literally a thing. Like they actually did nothing to stop crime. What they would do back in the day, they was actually a Puritan police. So what they did, that back when we was heavily religious and we had a lot of socially conservative laws, so they would go around make sure people don't day drink. They'll make sure.
I got some bad news, Nick. We still do, buddy. We still do. That's not really a thing of the past.
Yeah, you're right on that one. But that what they did back in the day. Like even the idea that people had, the police. I guess even the liberal that will admit that the police is going too far now, they're like, well, the police they used to be good. When they've been good back in the day, they would just make sure that the wife not sleep on their husband. Like this kind of stuff they did in the 1800s. Make sure people not day drinking. Like that was their role. They wasn't stopping criminals. It was actually a notorious problem in the 1800s where you have police sheriffs that was bought off by these big outlaw groups. Like that was a thing. They always been massively corrupt and never worked. And then remember back in the Al Capone, what happened to Al Capone? The police force got bought up by Al Capone. They didn't understand him down. So it's like, bro, when you look at multiple phases in history, where you want to look at the current age, when you want to look at the 60s, when they were paired up with the KKK, when you look at the 30s, when they paired with the mobsters, when you look at the 1800s, when they paired with outlaws, like what era of history are you guys talking about where police were these upstanding moral bastions of justice? It never was a thing. It never happened, guys. Let it go. The fantasy never existed. And that's what we want to get point. And 10 demands is actually how you put that in action. That's to answer your original question. I get these 10s. But that what we want to do. We got to spread awareness and then put the demands and work on it on a local level. I mean, that's what you can get everything on our demands done at local level. There are a lot of information there. So go to 10demands.org. Check it out.
Awesome, dude. And so
10forjustice.com. Sorry, 10forjustice.com. Make sure I got
justice.com. Yeah. Well, so where can people go to learn more about you, to find all of your content and the Fred Hampton's Leftist podcast? Like, where can people go to find all that stuff?
Most people know me as Socialist MMA. That's my Twitter page. But Progressive Martial Artist, as seen as a hoodie here. That's my YouTube. I usually post replays of my Twitch. That is also the Progressive Martial Artist. I stream usually around this time, about 3-4 times a week. And you will see streams of the Fred Hampton podcast on there as well. The Fred Hampton podcast has its own page, the Fred Hampton podcast. But yeah, check me out on the Progressive Martial Arts YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, and sign up for my Substack as well, because I'm going to be continuing to release these great articles that you guys have been reading. And my main focus is on state violence and promoting leftist policy more than anything. My next thing I'm working on right now is defund the police. I talk about police abolition. You guys see how passionate I get about that. So I'm going to do an article. Maybe two. I've been hard time to determine how long.
Well, you know what, man? You should do one on defund, and then you should do one on abolish, because it's like, whenever people are like, I mean, and I'm sure you probably feel this way too. Whenever people are just like, well, I don't know about defund police, and I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, dude, defund the police is the first step. I'm actually an abolish the police guy too.
That's the point I'm making. That's
so we got to work you into it, folks. But we're not going to give up.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm making. That's what we advocate for in 10 demands, because like there's a road to abolition. That's the entire point of our group, and we gotta get the 10 demand done in order to transition to police abolition. So people always say, "Why do you push defund the police? Do you not abolition?" Yeah, I'm for that, bro. Like we working towards that. And that way you gotta advocate for defund police, advocate for all things that are on 10 demands, and that's in the carceral. Like that's what we are on. We want to end the entire carceral punishment system. And then the prison industrial complex, like completely getting rid of all that. So we working on that, and that what we got in the 10 demands, and that what you see on 10forjustice.com. So that's what my primary thing. Also, ranked choice voting, another one I'm going to do. I'm also on the board of National Ranked Choice Voting, because I think I said this after Bernie Sanders dropped out. I'm like, this is our number one thing we should be worried about right now, because you saw how third parties got hit hard. I mean, you had the two worst candidates, 2 rapists, 2 war criminals, and the third party still got less than 1%. Green Party got like 0.4%. So if you're one of the people that say, rah, we got to have a third party, but you're not advocating for ranked choice voting, I'm sorry, you're a deeply unserious person too. So if you're not advocating or you're not fighting hard for ranked choice voting, that's something that you need to look into and you need to be focused on. So that's another piece I'm going to be working on. Shout out to my boy Mitch Randall, who started the organization, and look out and put a lot of work into ranked choice voting, because it's very important.
Absolutely, man. Well, you're a busy guy, and that's freaking awesome. Everybody follow Socialist MMA on Twitter to be in tune with all that stuff. And I can't wait to check out. I'm going to check out that podcast, man. I'm real excited to hear the Fred Hampton's Leftist podcast. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news